Hello, lovely listeners. You're listening to Sarah Cudmore from Collage at Homegrown Learning. Today's podcast is for people that are new to homeschooling. There's been an additional rise in the number of people homeschooling since the children went back to school following the lockdown. And I've seen an increase in the number of people asking questions on Facebook and Instagram about what do they do? Where should they go for resources? So I thought I'd put together a little podcast to give you some information, some guidance, some support, some loving words, and share a little bit about the story or the journey that I went through. I would like to say though that everybody's journey is different. Everybody has different baggage, shall we say. So, some of you will be just choosing to homeschool and never having been to school. Some of you have chosen just not to send your child back to school. And just bear that in mind as the podcast progresses, because I think that is the biggest thing about homeschooling, is it is a very personal journey. There is no one way to do it. There is no right path to take. It is about following your gut, following your instincts as a parent, and listening to your own guidance about what feels right for your family and your child, and not judging. We don't judge anybody for the pathways that they take or the way they choose to do things. So I'll just share with you my journey and hope that in that it gives you some guidance and some words of love as you enter this exciting phase, although can be quite daunting. So to start with, if you have decided to deregister from school, you do need to write to the head teacher and tell them that you no longer wish to send your child to school. I would recommend going to a website or Facebook, going to someone like Education Otherwise, and I'll put the link in the show notes. They have template letters and guidance, and they have a legal background to enable you to make sure that you, if you're unsure about how to write to the head teacher, or your head teacher writes back to you asking you information that you're just not sure about, it's the best place to go. So once you've written to your head teacher, they should deregister your child from that school. And you then have the at the moment, although this is in consultation with the government, at the moment there is no statutory register, so it's your choice as to whether you tell the local authority that you are homeschooling your child. And with the local authority, that would be the elective home education officer. Now, again, you will get different responses from different people. Some people that have registered with the local authority and have found it to be a very fine journey, a non-judgmental journey, whereas other people have had quite heavy letters from their local authority and things like that. So it's your choice. Do look into it. And again, on Education Otherwise, there is lots of information and guidance about that process too. If you do tell the local authority, it is then their responsibility to monitor how your child is progressing. And they will, each local authority creates their own policy around this. So, some local authorities will touch base with you and they will ask for a report, or will ask for you to complete some documentation that lets them know what your child's been learning and where they're at. Some local authorities will ask to meet You don't have to meet with them, but you can invite them into your home and let them see your child and chat to your child, or you can meet them somewhere mutual and chat to them about what your child's doing. But again, this is all choice and how you feel about the system. So if you so please do look at Education Otherwise and do consider that carefully. And then the sort of the next phase is the most important phase in my opinion. Now, if you haven't sent your child to school, this may not be so important to you, but if you have sent your child to school, give yourself and your child time and space to. Now, the term is deschool, which means to get the system out of you. So that means that you spend a period of time doing just lovely, ordinary things with your child that are not school or system or timetable kind of related. You don't have to do this, but there are huge benefits. And what I did was I started straight away, having left school, formally teaching my child. I literally, and I really quickly, after a week or two, realised that it just wasn't working, and it didn't feel right for me to be at home with two children and to be schooling them in a formal way. And certainly they weren't having much of it, and everything became quite difficult. So I did some research and found out about this deschooling, and the kind of general rule of thumb is like a month for every year that they've been in school. And I really laugh about this because actually a lot of the time it's the parents that need the deschooling. So if you took a month for every year you've been at school, that's quite a long time for us as parents to deschool. But I would say with the guidelines around the time that you spend deschooling, to go with your gut. So just give yourself and your child some time to get used to being with each other 24/7, to have time to talk to each other about your hopes and dreams and your things you enjoy, and just play with each other, chat with each other, do some ordinary stuff that enables you just to find out more about what your child thinks and feels. And it's amazing actually during this lockdown how many parents have said to me that they now feel like they know their children. And actually when you think about a child at school and the sort of limited time that they get at home, sometimes they've been to a club or an after school, and then it's the weekends and they're often doing more clubs. Actually the time you get to spend with them, quality time, is quite minimal. So just really enjoy that time. You can do all sorts of things with your child, like you could do some mind mapping or some mood board, cutting out like bits of collage and just chatting with each other about what would they like to do, what are they interested in, what would they like to learn, and just record those kind of things. But also use this time as a time to do some research. I can honestly say, I was in education for 20 years and I've never done as much research as I have in the last 5 years. And it's fascinating when you start to actually read about child development, and you would think that schools and teachers do that, but actually my own personal experience was that we spent much more time talking about data and results and buildings and sort of not talking about child development, how their brains develop and all of that kind of thing. So that's absolutely fascinating as a parent to try and do a little bit of research, and also use this time to perhaps find some community, find some links. Depending on your situation, you may already know people that homeschool, or you may not. And Facebook, I think, is probably the easiest way to connect with people, and and so the connecting with people is really important for you as a parent, to have people that you can talk to about your homeschool experiences. But actually, it's also really important, to try and develop some kind of community for your child. There may be local groups that meet, depending on the situation with COVID, but there may be groups that meet where you can, hopefully find space to actually physically meet with people. Or there are some fantastic ways of connecting these days with Zoom and all sorts of and gaming and things like that for children, to try and forge some new relationships. Although they may well have lots of friends from school, and actually their social network might remain with those school friends. But whatever way you go about it, it's really important to find that community for you as a parent, that dialogue that you can have. I certainly didn't start homeschooling with a family around me that were fully supportive of what I was doing, and I think that can put a lot of pressure on people. Sometimes it's you really want to homeschool your children, but your partner doesn't, or you've got opposition from your parents, or the friends that you thought were your friends are now questioning you and creating distance from you. So just having that online community, even, I think is a invaluable resource. So I think as well, when you start to delve into the kind of research behind homeschooling, you will find a whole variety of different methods for homeschooling. And I think it's quite an eye-opener, but it is really worth spending some time looking at the different methods, thinking about your child, talking to your child, and working out, like, how would you like to do things. And this is where I say there's not one size fits all. There's not a manual that you should follow, but it's really, really, really go deep and work out what it is and how it's going to work best for you and your child. So today we're in such a privileged position where we have a massive variety of homeschooling methods. So you can choose to dip into different methods, and I certainly do that. Or you can decide that one method really stands out for you, and that's what you're going to do. And you could try that, and 6 months down the line, things aren't working for you, and you need to come back to this base again and work out why it's not working, and what would be the best path for you to follow. And I do think that is a really lovely thing about homeschooling, is that we are really reflective. There is not it doesn't feel like a failure when things aren't working. You use your research and your passion to want the best for your children, to go back to looking at, why isn't it working? What else could we do? How could we try this? And that approach is far more natural, and sort of sets you aside from the kind of school approach, where there really is that one approach that just doesn't fit all, and is one of the reasons why so many children don't enjoy school as they should, or don't enjoy the learning from school as much as they should. Now, on my website, collageapp.co.uk resources, I have a resource about homeschooling methods. So I'll run through a few of them and put a link at the bottom of the show notes. But you could decide to formally homeschool your child, and that would be taking a curriculum, could be the national curriculum, the same that the schools use, and you could plan a timetable around your curriculum, and deliver your homeschooling like that. And you could decide to do elements of the national curriculum and dip into other things. So that would be classed as traditional or formal homeschooling. Some people look to get tutors, which obviously there's a huge cost with that, but some people feel that's necessary to get tutors for certain subjects. The sort of what seems to be the fastest growing method of schooling seems to be unschooling, and unschooling is definitely not a new thing. It's been around a long time. So there's books, dating back nearly 100 years of people talking about unschooling methods. They may not have been labelled as unschooling, but they are definitely the same methods. So unschooling involves following the interests that the children have rather than a set curriculum. And there is also an additional kind of term to unschooling, which is radical unschooling, and this extends the philosophy of unschooling. It involves partnering with children in all aspects of the day. So, for example, there may not be any particular boundaries around things like when children eat, when they go to bed, what they watch. But there may well be as well, but it's all done with the child. There is a great podcast by a super friend of mine on my podcasts. So there's an unschooling one and a radical unschooling one. So if you're interested in that, do take a listen. So then there are other methods like the Steiner, Montessori for the younger development, eclectic homeschooling. So eclectic is where you sort of dip into different methods. I didn't say with Steiner. So Steiner, or the Waldorf, is based on the philosophy of Rudolf Steiner, which emphasizes the importance of children's spiritual, moral, creative, artistic development alongside their intellectual progression. And Montessori is more around like giving children freedom within their limits and teaching them kind of independence of different aspects. And you've got computer-based homeschooling, so they could be doing large majority or all of their learning via computer. And there are many different programs such as like IXL, Century, Khan Academy. There's all sorts of different programs or online schools that children can use for this. And you've got Charlotte Mason, and Charlotte Mason is it goes back, I don't know the date off the top of my head, but it's very, very old, and based on feeding the child an intellectual diet of the best ideas. So she emphasizes using high quality literature to learn from, an education that involves the whole person and not just their mind. And then you've got classical homeschooling, which is split into 3 stages, which first is about learning and recalling lots of facts. Second is when the child links the facts to make connections. And then finally, when they use the connections to create and formulate their own opinions. Now, all of these methods are all very interesting and definitely worth looking into. And there are different terms and more methods than I've written there, but these are seem to be the most popular. So do take a look at those. And I will also put a link to the bottom of the show notes of some books that I think are really useful when you're first starting to think about methods or your ethos or your kind of vision for homeschooling. I do think it's really worth thinking about timetables, because everybody kind of thinks that school should be within a sort of certain period of time, or this is the time when we do our English and maths. And I'm not going to say whether it's right or wrong, but I did find I started off with a timetable, and it was really clear for me to see very, very quickly that learning happens all the time. It happens from the minute they wake up to the moment they go to sleep. It happens 7 days a week, every day of the year. So the notion of kind of having a timetable, or only doing learning for term based, for me, and the methods that I've chosen with my children, it didn't really work. And actually by taking the structure of the timetable away has enabled me to relax and loosen my control. Definitely something that's come out of this whole homeschooling journey is that thought around how much we try to control our children. But with the we learning happens all the time, and I'm capturing learning through the Collage app, but I'm capturing it all the time. And it wasn't until I started capturing the learning that I realized, oh my gosh, my child's playing with Lego, but actually he is designing the most incredible slot machine out of Lego. And I started to look in more detail at what they were doing and capturing the learning across a whole range of areas. So sometimes a timetable limits you in terms of thinking, right, this is when they're doing their literacy and this is when they're doing that, and then you fail to see the learning outside of that. So it's just something, there's no right or wrong, but it's just something to consider. And the same goes for the kind of holidays. And I'm not one to say don't take holidays, but actually when the realization of learning happening all the time kind of hits home, you realize that it gives you the space to and freedom to, for example, if my daughter woke up and she had hardly slept last night and was feeling really emotional about, I don't know, her pet not being very well or something, I have the freedom with that day to just not worry about a timetable, not worry about, because the learning's happening all the time and I'm capturing things all the time. I don't feel that the learning is restricted to a Monday to Friday between 9 and 12. And we don't have holidays like that. We just continue our learning. So, for example, reading, when my daughter showed signs that she was ready for reading and we started reading just is something that we just do daily, unless she doesn't feel like it, or unless we're off out that day, or we are actually doing something that means that we can't read, or it would just get in the way of the thing we're doing. So and I did used to find in school, when children had the holidays, particularly the summer holiday, that when they came back after that summer holiday, they had in the subjects that school would be measuring children on, they had sort of made a step back. They sort of 6 weeks of not reading, but I mean it doesn't take long for them to kind of get into it again. It's just what are we saying to our children when we say learning happens between this time and that time? Anything else around it doesn't get the same consideration. If you are, and it works best for you to have a timetable, and for some people it does, some people are trying to work from home and they need to sort of have a rough timetable of when they can do things with their children. And what I would say to consider with a timetable is that a 10-minute one-to-one with your child on a math skill or something is actually so is the same actually as them probably having 2 hours of maths in a classroom. You have to consider that in a classroom there's 30 children, there's one teacher, sometimes a TA. So that teacher in that 1 hour has 2 minutes per child to spend with them. And, you know, the large majority of the time the teacher is helping either extend some children or work with particular children or support children who don't quite understand what they're supposed to be doing. And therefore, it may be actually that your child doesn't get any support for days on end. So it is really important to remember when you're doing a little timetable, if you're going to do a timetable, that you really don't need to spend an hour on English and an hour on maths every single day. So think about it, play with it. You know, when you're working with your child, some activities as well carry different sort of time schedules. So if you're going to do some cooking with your child and do some maths and some D&T with them, actually you might be cooking and, you know, doing that for sort of from half an hour to an hour, whereas actually if you just your child's, I don't know, learnt a certain times table, you might just want to touch base with them with some 5 mental maths questions, just to touch base to see if they can do it. Or you might want to look at the clock, and you might have timetabled in 10 minutes of maths, and as soon as you start to do some clock work with your child, they either get it and you're like, oh, they know that, there's no point in pursuing this, or they really don't get that and 10 minutes isn't long enough, and you need to come back to it the next day and maybe spend a bit longer. So I definitely, wherever you can, be flexible if you're going to put a timetable in place. And actually the timetable things just reminded me that, you know, if you going back to the deschooling, a lot of homeschoolers have said to me, you know, gosh, when you deschool, you know, it took my child so many weeks, and I'm just so paranoid that they're going to fall behind. And I think my own children, I think it was between like 3 and 6 months before we sort of settled into a bit more of a kind of I don't want to say routine because that sounds too timetabled as well, but until we sort of found our feet. The thing is about worrying about children falling behind, and I've got really upset with the government saying that all these children are falling massively behind because of the lockdowns. And actually, a child might be falling behind in terms of the judgments or the levels or the SATs style of learning. So, you know, but actually these children that have not been at school, they haven't not been learning every minute of the day. It's just that the learning that is more free and more creative and is not measurable. So for them, you know, when a child comes back to school and they can't rapid recall maths, mental maths within a 30-second timer, they've fallen behind. Or when they can't, there's a whole list of things that I could reel off. So it is really important to remember that they're never really falling behind. They're just taking different pathways and learning just different things and making different connections. And that time and space that you have with your child while you're deschooling is really valuable in terms of going forward on this big journey. I'm thinking of all these things that I meant to say. I also wanted to say, when you consider your like homeschooling method, if you're going to choose one specific method, it is useful to consider, where are you going with this journey? So for some people, they are really passionate about homeschooling their child while they're in their primary years, and they're looking to send their children back into secondary school when they're at that age, and that might be because they wish them to do GCSEs, or they don't have the money to pay for GCSEs, whatever their choice is, whatever their choice is, it's important to consider that when you're deciding on a homeschool method. It just depends really on your child's journey. So with unschooling, unless a child specifically chose to, they might not read until very late. Some homeschooling children don't read until they're 10, 11 or 12, and if you're sending them to secondary school at 11 and they've only just started to read, that could hinder their ability to work as independently as other children in secondary school. So I'm not saying that that they can't do that, but it is worth considering when you're trying to work out which method you're going to choose. I also think it's a really, really nice activity to do and maybe touch base on several times throughout your journey, is for you to consider what is it you want. If you imagine your child at roughly 16, it could be 14, it could be 18, wherever you kind of see the end of I don't want to say the end of learning either, because learning, we're all learning till the day we die, but that sort of end phase of the education period, as seen by the school system. What is it that you would see your child doing, or you would hear your child saying? What would they look like? What would they be able to do? And what are your hopes and your dreams for them? And kind of list those down. And you can do it with your children as well. It's a really beautiful task to do with your children. And I think the outcome that you will find is that the things that you are looking for from your children are actually nothing to do with 5 A-star GCSEs in this, that and the other. You will be looking, I suspect, at your child just having great emotional intelligence, being really confident, being able to work independently, but also being able to collaborate with others. And all those kind of words will be coming out. And actually, they're really helpful in enabling you to think about what kind of homeschooling method you want to choose. So it's a really, really nice task to do. I think that has probably covered most of it, apart from a lot of people are worried about what resources they should have and what books they should buy. And I would just say, just take things really slowly, and the main thing is getting to know your child and what they're interested in, and where they see themselves going. So there are some other resources on my resources site about how you can deliver certain subjects, either organically or more formally, and a little list of useful resources to have at home. And also there's a really good article on there about do you need to be a teacher to homeschool. That's really useful if you're lacking a little bit of confidence, and inevitably at the beginning many parents have butterflies in their tummy and question themselves, and am I doing the right thing? And I think the thing that I've held in my head is that someone once said to me, I just take every day at a time and don't think too far ahead. And actually living in that present moment is so much more healthier than worrying about where they're going to get to, whether you're going to do a good enough job. I really think just living in the moment and enjoying the time you have with your children and embracing all the wonderful things that they say and do is the most important part of this journey. And if you're connected with your children, if you're present with your children, that's just going to make the journey richer and more enjoyable. So I really hope that has helped some of you who are new to homeschooling. If there are any specific questions that you have that you would like answered, or any resources that you think would be really helpful, please do contact me at hello@collageapp.co.uk. And until next time, keep calm and carry on.